Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Halifax Water Board on Thursday, November 24th, 2022. First item we have on the agenda is the ratification of the in-camera motions. If I could have someone make that motion.
I can move, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Zaharov, do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Commissioner Kolomitsev seconds that motion. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, item 1B, we have approval of the order of business with additions and deletions. So I have two that item 7, as shown on the agenda, was moved to the in-camera portion. So it has already been addressed. And I would like to move information report 1I to be item 10 in other business. Was there any other changes to the agenda? No?
I'll move that amended order of business, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovelace. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Commissioner Zaharov seconds that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is carried. Item 2 is the approval of minutes from the regular meeting held on Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. I need a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Commissioner Kolomitsev makes that motion, and Commissioner Deagle-Gammon is seconding that.
Sure.
Any errors or admissions? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All those in approval of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Business arising from the minutes.
There is one item of business arising from the minutes. Item 5.1, the Cogswell redevelopment capital submission was submitted to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board for approval. The URB has set the schedule for a paper hearing, and that process is underway. There are very few interveners, very few information requests have been received, and we anticipate it will continue to be a paper hearing, and we should get a decision on that by the end of the fiscal year.
Any questions from anyone on that update? Okay, moving on. Item 4.1, financial operating results for the 7 months ending October 31st, 2022.
I'm here. Would you like me to walk through the report?
Yes, please.
So just a couple of key highlights. We always start with our cash position, which continues to be healthy at around $88 million. Some of that money has been used so far in November to make some of the debt repayments that we were required to make. So that number is now at approximately $66 million. Accounts receivable continues to be healthy, and we look for the reduction in the over 30 days, which we continue to see. Accounts payable are increasing as capital projects have ramped up, and this is sort of the key spend time for us, so that is as expected and good to see. On the financial part, on the profit and loss part of the equation, we have increased our forecast, anticipating that our December 1st approval of our rates will go through. That adds approximately $5.7 million of additional revenue, which is as anticipated. Our consumption continues to increase, so we're at approximately 1.1% increase in consumption so far for the year, which is a very positive situation for us. All the items that we've continued to report are showing up in our forecasts. The pressure related to our operating costs, specifically chemicals, has been reflected in our revised forecast. On the last page of the report, we give a summary of where the surpluses are expected, deficits are expected for the year. I apologize, the headings say 21-22, should say 22-23.
Yes.
And what we're seeing is we budgeted for a deficit of about $10.9 million. Our forecast is a deficit for 5.9. So that reflects the increase in the revenue, assuming the rates go ahead as of December 1st. The main concern for us continues to be when we have accumulated deficits, and that is continuing to show up in the stormwater side. In our rate application, the UARB has agreed with our proposal to increase stormwater rates by 20% effective effective December 1st, and another 20% effective April 1st. So those two increases will help bring that back into those costs back into line. But as we told the UARB at the time, those increases are still not enough to bring stormwater into a cost neutral basis. So that is continuing to be a challenge for us, and we anticipate we'll be going back in the next fiscal year with an additional increase to stormwater. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And this forecast includes the anticipated rate increase?
Yes, it does.
Yes. Any questions from the board members? I just had two questions. Page 4 of the report, it indicates stormwater site general service revenue had been forecasted at $1 million lower due to the boundary expansion not generating as much revenue as initially budgeted. Can you speak to that?
It's $100,000 lower, not $1 million, but it's yeah.
Sorry.
So we did our preliminary estimates, and as the number of customers has been refined, our forecast is approximately $100,000.
And thank you. And second question, just above that, the late payment and other connection fees, it says they're to decrease. You're saying the revenue would decrease, right? It's not that do we expect if the interest rate applied to these goes down, will we have a longer payment cycle, or you were just forecasting the revenue on the fees and the interest?
So as part of our rate application, one of the changes we put forward and has been accepted is to reduce the interest rate on overdue accounts from 19.6% to 14%. So our budget would have been built on the 19% number. So that adjustment is reflecting that decrease in the interest rate. The other part of that is right now, if we have a customer that has an overdue account and we deliver a notice or need to go to the house, we charge a fee. As we talk to the board, that is permissive in our rules and regulations, and we've put forward to the board, and it was accepted that we stop charging those fees. And again, it's purely from an affordability perspective. Clearly, folks are if they are struggling to pay the bill, adding 19% interest to it, and adding service fees makes it even harder. So this is our approach to try and reduce the impact. So that's now being reflected in our projections.
I think that was a good idea. Commissioner Zahara?
Thanks, Madam Chair. A question about page 3, table of aging of account payable. So I see there is an, if I'm reading it correctly, there is an increase in aged accounts.
Yes.
I guess the question is, what is the main collection challenge today? So that the bills are simply not being paid, and what's assuming the interest rates are being reduced and the visit fees being waived. What's the plan to actually collect it? How Halifax Water is planning on addressing on this gap in accounts payable?
Yeah, so accounts payable on page 3 are our payables to our vendors and our suppliers. So what the increase that's being reflected there are two things. One is the amount of our capital continues to increase. So the amount of invoices that are coming in the dollar value has gone up. The age is increasing because we changed our process and are now recording the holdbacks into our payables. So if we have a project and it has a 10% holdback that is outstanding for, let's say, a year until the guarantee process is done, that's reflected in our accounts payable. In previous years, that was not. So that's one of the things that's triggering the aging of the payables. On the receivable side, we are continuing to actively collect. The issue for us is we're just not charging as much interest or the fees that we would have previously been charging.
Thanks for clarification. Apologies for from whatever reason I misunderstood accounts payable. I thought it's a collection, but thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem.
There are no further questions. We'll move on to item 4.2, proposed 2023 Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan Budget.
And I'm going to ask Heather Britton to do the presentation. Heather is our resident pension expert, so she has prepared the budget and we'll walk you through it.
Good morning, Heather. Go ahead.
Good morning. So yes, item 4.2, this is the proposed 2023 Halifax Regional Water Commission Employees Pension Plan Budget. I will just walk you through some of the assumptions we considered in preparing the budget. So next slide, please. The statement of changes in net assets available for benefits. This is our core report that we report on each quarter and that we prepare the budget on. And we're just showing the comparison of the proposed 2023 budget and the approved 2022 budget. So for 2023, we're showing revenue of $7 million, contributions of $6.9 million, offset by expenses of $6.4 million, for a proposed and budgeted net change of assets available for benefits of $7.5 million. So comparing that to the 2022 budget, you can see we had budgeted $16.2 million for 2022. And of course, the biggest change there, the biggest impact was on the revenue side for 2022. So next slide, please. So starting with the revenue budget of $7 million, that's made up of two components. One is investment income, or net investment income, because it's actually net of investment manager fees. So we're proposing a budget of $2.6 million. And then the increase in the net assets available for benefits of $4.4 million is what we're proposing. So the key assumptions that we considered for the investment income, we're basing that on the 2002 estimate, which was an extrapolation of the September year-to-date results. That number is fairly consistent year over year, but just basing that on 2022, where 2022 was a little bit of an iffy year on the revenue side. For the increases in the fair value of investment assets, we based that on a 5-year average, and again, using the 2022 estimate, which was the September extrapolation. Basing it on the 5-year average was, in 2019, 20, and 21, we had some pretty significant gains in that category, and then 2022, we saw some losses. So basing that on an average, excuse me, seemed to make sense. So we're budgeting contributions at 6.9 million. So that's made up of employer contributions of 3.4, employee contributions of 3.4, and additional voluntary contributions of 0.1 or 100,000. Some of the key assumptions that we used were estimated 20 new hires. Of course, we don't know yet, as the corporate budget has not yet been finalized. And we don't want to overstate that figure because then that would be saying that there was more money going into the plan. So it's always good to be a bit conservative there. Salary and wage escalation, we based the non-union on CPI of 2%. And then the union based on the collective agreement. So the schedules and the collective agreements at November 1st, 2022 were 2% and 1.75% respectively for 227 and 1431. Those agreements expire at October 31st, 2023. So we use 2% for November and December of 2023. And just a note on salaries, again, not sure what's happening next year as far as CPI and collective agreements. For every 1% additional increase in salaries and wages, it would equate to approximately $65,000 in additional contributions into the plan. The assumption around the pensionable earnings, well, it's not an assumption, it's actually the actual. So the pensionable earnings cap, it was capped at $140,945 for the past 8 years. And due to the plan redesign back in 2015-16, as of 2023, that is going to increase 1% each year. So for 2023, that has gone up to the 142,000 number reported. Contribution rate of 9.6%. That's as per the actuarial valuation that was conducted at January 1st, 2022. Moving on into the expense category, we are proposing a budget of 6.4 million. So that's made up of our benefit payments to our pensioners, termination payments for people that have left the plan, pre-retirement death benefit payments, and administrative expenses. So some of the considerations there, the indexing of our pensions is based on 2% and 1% for pre-2016 and post-2015 service respectively. And that's again based on the plan redesign from back in 2016. Estimated 9 new retirees, that's based on a 5-year average and coincidentally ties into the number of people that have actually expressed interest in retiring, or some have even confirmed their retirements in 2023. Along with, we take, we kind of look at everybody's eligible retirement date and we take a portion of that and say, okay, let's assume that 1/3 of the people that can retire actually will retire. Terminations, we based that on a 5-year average plus 10%. We added the 10% on because there's been some pretty significant terminations where people haven't acted on their termination benefits as of yet. So we thought we better add those into the 2023 figures. And of course, we always assume no pre-retirement death benefits. So that summarizes the assumptions that we considered in the budget. And does anybody have any questions?
Okay, let's put the motion on the floor and then we'll check again if there's any questions for Heather.
I can put the motion on the floor if you like.
Thank you, Commissioner Deagle-Gammon.
From the report, can I just read it from the recommendation or?
Yes, please.
Okay, good. I would recommend that the board approve the proposed 2023 budget for the plan covering the period of January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023.
I'll second.
Commissioner Zaharov, I second that. Any further questions or discussion? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Deagle-Gammon, you're up.
Thanks. I have one question. So the YMPE, the year's maximal pensionable earnings is, I think, around 64.9 right now. So when we look at the pensionable earnings cap of the 142,354, how often is that looked at or changed? When does that move?
So that figure is actually set by CRA every year, and it does change every year.
Yeah.
But it was frozen in 2015, and it was frozen for 8 years.
It was
so
frozen
8
for
years.
8 years.
Yes. up to and
So-
including 2022.
It was frozen in our pension plan text. It wasn't frozen by CRA. CRA has continued to index it every year.
Right, okay. So it's the plan that has frozen it, but not CRA.
Yes, that
And
is
so will
plan
that-
redesign that we did.
sorry, I missed that?
That was part of the plan redesign that we did in 2016.
Okay. And would that form any part of the collective bargaining? Is the pension tied in any way to collective bargaining, collective agreement?
Yes, it is. There are clauses in both our collective agreements saying that any changes to the benefit formula essentially require approval of the two union groups. So if we wanted to make any changes to the pension plan, it would have to be done through the collective bargaining process. However, if we're making changes, for example, to contribution rates, based on recommendations from actuaries where we're not changing the benefit formula, then we don't require any approval to do it because we're just maintaining the plan as it is. So essentially, it's any changes to benefit formulas that would trigger involvement of the two union groups.
Great, thank you very much.
Any further questions from the floor? Okay, we'll vote on the motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Heather.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Item 4.3, impact of decision on 2022 general rate application.
Thank you. We had this on the agenda to give you an opportunity to ask any questions. We didn't prepare a PowerPoint presentation. We did prepare a brief information report. But in summary, there was nothing negative arising from the decision. We were very pleased with the decision from the general rate hearing. There was some positive reflection in the decision about Halifax Water's efforts on cost containment and prudent management of expenditures. There was also recognition that some of the work we've been doing over the last few years about planning and asset management are supporting our capital expenditure requests very well. The area where they do want us to continuing to focus is that planning activity, and there are probably at least 3 specific areas that they have an ongoing interest in. One is the planning for the upgrade of the harbor solution plants to secondary treatment. The second one is the upgrade of the Mill Cove treatment facility. And the third is the biosolids processing facility. So they're recognizing the work we've done to date and basically encouraging us to keep pace with all of the various planning studies and the timelines that we've committed to. And we were ordered to do a compliance filing. We had talked about that, I believe, earlier today. And the new rates will be in effective December 1st. We have sent out the fall edition of Water Talk. It has some information for customers on the new rates. There's lots of information on our website. And when we begin to implement the new rates on the face of the bills, there's also some explanatory notes on the face of the bill. And our customer care center is well armed with FAQs. We have not received many phone calls with respect to the rate hearing or the increases in rates or the decision. But typically it's not the decision release that prompts that attention. It's when people actually get the bills in their mailbox. So we'll be ready for that when that happens.
Any questions from the board? And on behalf of the board, thank you to the entire staff for all the effort that went into that. And we really appreciate in particular, the detail and the planning that's going on for the multi-year plans we have in place, as well as consideration for affordability and world-class service for all of our customers. So we really appreciate all the hard work that went into that.
Yeah, I'd like to echo your thanks to the Halifax Water staff that were involved in the rate hearing and the application. It's almost an 8-month-long process, and it's fairly arduous, and our team did a great job.
Yeah.
Moving on to capital approvals, item 5.1, capital expenditures for the 7 months ending October 31st, 2022.
So I can start. As we do, we summarize sort of our expenditures to date. So our budget is of total funds available is approximately 322 million. We've spent to the end of October approximately 95 million. So we still have approximately $226 million available at the end of October. I will say from the last report that we issued at the end of August, we have spent close to $16.4 million. So that's an encouraging sign in terms of our ability to spend our capital money. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know Reid is here if there's any specifics on individual projects.
Any questions from the board? I just had one, Reid. This is great progress. As you know, the board has been focused on this for a number of years now on the delivering of the capital plan. Any comment on the measures you had put in place and the plan that you had developed to start to tackle this issue? Any changes contemplated, or how do you think the plan's going?
Yeah, I think on a number of fronts, and one thing Kathy alluded to with the URB is encouraging us to increase our capacity. So we're working on adding staff at the moment. We're right in the middle of that process. In a workshop last January, I shared with the board our plans to improve how we do capital delivery. We're right in the midst of reorganizing that department. Or that section. We've at the end of the summer, we identified amongst the let's say 5 managers on the engineering side that report to me. We've identified 4 senior roles to take over the new groups of asset management, capital project delivery, infrastructure planning, and in energy and business development. So those managers have been identified and appointed, and I've been working with them. We meet once a week for 2 hours to flesh out the org structure. And we're looking right now of adapting to our new system and new department organization probably around March 1st. I'd said 4 of 5 managers. One of our current managers, Ian Guppy, is retiring in January. We also have created a section that we're calling strategic projects to manage these very large projects we have on. Things like the Water Supply Enhancement Program, the Burnside Operations Center, the Mill Cove Treatment Plant upgrade, the Biosolids Processing Facility, and other big projects that come along. And we're right in the midst of a competition to find somebody to lead that department, and we hope to announce that maybe within the week.
Thank you, Reid. That was a great update. I thought you might focus on the ability to get resources in the current competitive market.
Yeah, that is very challenging, but it's interesting. Kathy and I both in our HR department, everybody's been involved in discussions in industry about doing this, and we're trying some new things. And actually, HR has been very cooperative. Particularly, let's say, frontline engineering jobs, being ready to present offers much more quickly after successful interviews and things like that. So we've only been at that sort of new way of doing things for a couple of weeks, but so far it seems to be going well.
Thank you, Reid. Moving on, item 5.2, Burnside Operations Facility Construction Phase Funding Approval.
Yeah, that will be me. And I believe Rob Gillis. Yes, Rob is the project manager for this project. Rob is with me here. He can help answer any questions you have. So you have a report. We're seeking approval for $2.765 million for what we're calling the design validation stage. And what we were doing, this project is a first for us. It may be the first in Atlantic Canada, but it's been around for a few years. It's called integrated project delivery. It
Right.
differs from design build, and traditional plans and specs are design bid build. And what we do in integrated project delivery is we develop a preliminary design. We go to the market and say, we have a preliminary design. We are looking to build a building. And in this case, this is our budget. And actually what we do is we select a team based on their capabilities, their willingness to work with us, their approaches to things like energy conservation and innovation, and that type of thing. And then we work with them to build a building within our budget. The partner that we pick is incented to provide savings for us along the way. So if we could build the building to less, but we're at the table during that process. So for both the next year, and I should say our request for proposals process closes tomorrow. So we're looking forward to seeing how that goes. And by the end of the fiscal year in March, we should select a successful partner. And then we enter what we call the design validation stage. And that's where our contracting team with us at the table gets into the process of actually designing the building, making those choices. Do we want to spend a little more here? Do we want to spend a little less here? Bigger building, smaller building? And at that point, at the end of that, there's an off-ramp for us. If we don't think it's working out, there's an off-ramp for the contractor. But ideally, it's all collaborative and we're good. We're narrowing in on the building that we want. And that would result in, Rob, about a year from now, we would have a design and we'd be coming here with approval for funding to get the building approved. So what we're seeking now is the $2.765 million for the design validation stage.
Thank you, Reid, and good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Let's put the motion on the floor and then we can have a discussion.
I guess I can do that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Deagle-Gavin. The motion is on the screen.
It is indeed. I would move that the Halifax Water Board approve funding in the amount of $2.765 million for the design validation phase of the Burnside Operations Facility Integrated Project Delivery Project.
Second.
Commissioner Lovelace has seconded that motion. Is there any questions or discussion from the board? Commissioner Zaharov. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, Commissioner Zaharov.
Sorry, one question and one comment about the report. So the question is, Reid, you mentioned that it's a fairly new approach in Atlantic Canada, perhaps in the area in general. So any first impressions how the industry cooperates on this one? Do you see any interest and it's well accepted, or any feedback on that without going into any confidential details, obviously?
Yeah, so far so good, and I mean Rob is closer to that, so I'll invite Rob to answer that question. He's been, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, we had the same concerns at the start of the project. So what we issued was a request for information out to the industry back in May to find out what the industry is thinking about the integrated project delivery and let them know that that's the direction we're going. We did receive 13 responses from the industry. 7 of them were contractors, 5 of them were designers, and one I can't remember at the time. But out of the 6 out of the 7 contractors recommended that we proceed with an IPD based on the type of project that we described. So there is interest out there, as well as the other 5 designers said that they promote the IPD and they are willing to work with it. And there's a lot of interest out there to proceed.
Yeah, and Commissioner, you're right, because it's closed. I'll be careful what I say, but we hear things from the industry, so we're anticipating a healthy handful of responses.
That sounds promising. Thanks so much. And just one thing I wanted to note, item 5.2, page 2, I suspect there is a typo and there is a redundant zero in the building design and construction cost was estimated at. That's a paragraph 2.
You
That's
said
just
page 2?
yeah, page 2, paragraph 2.
Yes, there's an extra zero there.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just trying to find that in the report again. Thank you, Costi. So I built a building under the design bid build, so I'll have to say that I am in favor of design bid build, but I found this report really interesting to read, so I went and did a little bit of extra research to find out about this new approach, and yeah, it sounds great. Are any of the interested parties previously design bid builders that are looking to transition into a different approach? I'm just curious if there's any interest that way. And just a comment that it was really nice to see that the sale of the current assets goes back to the source of which they were applied to. So it was really nice to read that in the report. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner, to answer your question, I think of the contractors that responded, there was a handful that perhaps locally they've not done integrated project delivery, but they're local branches of national firms that have certainly done integrated project delivery. There's also purely local firms that are eager to get into it. And I wouldn't characterize it as switching from design bid build, but they want to serve all their customers. And so I think contractors are, they're seeing that this is the way the world is going for certain types of buildings, and they want to be in that game.
Yeah, and I guess, so yeah, you're right. I don't, that's a switch, but maybe an evolution, right? And so would there be any consideration, I guess, when you're looking at those proposals to support local, to, even if there's like a local industry with a national affiliation, but would there be any consideration there? And that's when you're looking at who you're going to choose, would there be consideration for looking at local companies?
Yeah, I would say not explicitly in our process, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but certainly we're very concerned about the anytime, whether it's even a consulting assignment, of what's the project management support that we're going to get. We're also concerned about supply chain stuff and ability to support warranties and all that type of thing. So, if there's a strong team on the ground versus a team that's flying in, that goes into the mix when we're considering scoring.
Right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
I have a very similar question. I believe in previous meetings I had asked something and I was told that Halifax Water has staff with experience in this integrated project delivery methodology. I'm just wondering if there's additional staff being trained currently and how have they been adapting to this new method?
Yeah, so a number of our staff, including Rob, have gone to a recent seminar that was put on by the Construction Association of Nova Scotia. It was training in integrated project delivery. I apologize if you misunderstood that or we misrepresented. I don't believe we have any staff with that specific training, but we do have an IPD consultant as part of the Halifax Water project team. And also it's highly recommended by the procurement consultant, the procurement law office that we've been using. In fact, and Rob has it in the report, it's when you compare what you think the project would cost when you start out to what it turned out to be. Public sector owners all over North America invariably say IPD gives you the best results. And that's from the procurement office. So I think we have enough support in it, and Rob and some other Halifax Water staff have been trained.
Excellent, thank you.
Sorry,
one.
to add one comment, Commissioner Kolomeitsev. The IPD model also dramatically reduces the risk of post-project litigation or issues with respect to the procurement because it is a very collaborative method. It's designed to have everyone at the table talking and working through issues. So it really reduces that risk for the utility, which is significant as well.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi. Great point. I just had one question. Thank you for the background report along with this request for funding. I think it was very helpful for the board members and very informative as a new approach. Can you just provide a little insight on how we landed on it based on it being new to Atlantic Canada? Is that coming out of the procurement office again?
Well, it was a bit of an evolution, Madam Chair. We originally started to do this as design bid build. And as we got into the design, primarily when it came time to talking about building envelope, and there's probably a half a dozen building envelope choices, but in Halifax, it's either largely tilt-up concrete or insulated steel panels on a steel frame. And we were finding out that you have to make that choice fairly early on in the design process, but then you're locking yourself into certain contractors, you're locking yourself into supply chain issues. And even with our consultants, we really didn't have a good handle on what those things were. So, early on, maybe a year and a half ago in this, our architects were recommending insulated steel panels because of the energy value and things, but the deliveries were running 18 months. So it's going to be an extended contract time. So we started discussions with our design consultant. We looked at design build in addition to design bid build, and through talking to the procurement office and just doing our own research and other people, we arrived at IPD.
And any comment on the ability to include all the sustainability and leads criteria in an IDP model?
Yeah, I think because of the collaborative nature of it, all that is listed in our design requirements to be included. But I think with having the contractor and their experts at the table, on supply chains, on different technologies, that we'll have much better insight as to what our choices are as we make decisions on building systems. The contractor may bring forward things that we haven't considered that they can source easier than we might have thought would be able to source.
Rob's nodding his head at that.
Anything else on that, Rob? Or?
No, I think that's well said, Reid.
Okay. We already have a motion on the floor, right? We'll move to the vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, commissioners.
Item 5.3, the Fairview Cove Trunk Sewer additional funding request.
Okay, that is me as well, and I believe Josh DeYoung's with me, and Josh's group is bringing this project forward. There's Josh. So this project comes from our integrated resource plan. We have a 1970s era trunk sewer that runs along the Bedford Highway, along Bedford Basin, goes around the top of the peninsula, and ultimately ends up at our Fairview Cove, goes through Fairview Cove and ends up at our Duffer Street pumping station. And what the IRP identified is there's an area, a section of it about 750 meters in length, essentially running the length of the Fairview Cove container terminal, that has a hydraulic restriction in it. So to accommodate growth and potentially reduce flooding that occurs upstream, the solution is to build a parallel 1,500 millimeter diameter tunnel. So basically we're paralleling the part that's restricted to increase capacity. This project was previously approved by this board and then by the URB in February of 2021. The URB's approval was provisional in that they wanted us to revise our detailed design report to address 4 questions they had. So we were tasked with answering those questions and resubmitting the design report. We were getting ready to go to tender in around March, April of 2021. And Halifax Port Authority raised some concerns with us that they had about the routing through their property. So we have been working collaboratively with HPA to identify their concerns, to address various concerns that various tenants of theirs had with the routing. Those have been resolved. So we've completed the detailed design. We have a detailed design report that addresses 3 of the 4 URB questions. The 4th question, we have enough confidence in what the answer is today, but it'll be another few weeks before we have that report, at which point we will be sending that information to the URB with this funding request that we have before you. Right now, our plan is well, we need to talk about the timing of the tender, but the broad plan is that we'll be ready for tender by the end of the year. We hope to be ready to start construction in April. It's a tunnel about 30 to 50 meters underground, but we do need easements from the landowners. So the landowners include CN, Halifax Port Authority, and HRM. We have agreement in principle on the easements and the routing from all of those landowners. However, we do have one point of risk that might impact tendering timing, and that is the HRM parcel. They do not have clear title to the land at the moment that they need to give us an easement over. So they're working through a process to resolve that. And so that will dictate the timing of tendering. So the project was approved at $18.625 million. We've now we've completed the detailed design. We're now estimating the project cost to be $23.061 million. And so the approval or this request is to get that increased funding approval. 3/4 of this project is funded by the RDC. So the approximately $4.5 million additional we're seeking, 3/4 of that will come from the RDC funding. And I believe that. Do you want to add anything to that, Josh, at this time before we turn it over?
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay, let's put the motion on the floor and then we'll have a discussion. Commissioner Kolomeitsev?
Great. I move that the Halifax Water Board approve additional funding in the amount of $4,436,000 for the construction phase of the Fairview Cove Trunk Sewer Project for a revised estimated total project cost of $23,061,000.
I'll second.
Oh, Commissioner Lovelace put her hand up. Commissioner Lovelace with the second. Any questions from the floor? Okay, I just had 2 questions. You mentioned 3/4 of the fundings from the RDC. Reid, can the RDC support the increased cost as well?
I believe it can, but Louis may want to chime in on that.
Sorry, my apologies. I didn't quite catch the question.
The Reid mentioned that of the original $18 million budget, roughly 75% would come from the RDC. Will the RDC still support 75% based on the increased estimate to complete?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. And second question for me, table 2 has the updated cost estimate in the comparison. It mentions increase for inflation on most lines. Would you say the increase covers both inflation and what we're currently seeing in the market as well?
Josh, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah, I would say generally speaking, it's an increase for inflation, but also the discussion is around just the market volatility that we've seen on other projects in recently past board meetings. So generally speaking, I would say yes to answer your question.
Yeah. Say it's not just CPI inflation, it's construction market inflation.
Thank you, Josh. Okay, we'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Item 5.4, the Middle Musquodoboit Wastewater Treatment Facility Upgrade Funding.
Okay. My headphones clicked over to my phone, so you called item 5.4, did you, Madam
I
Chair?
did.
Okay.
You're an expensive guy to have at the meeting, Reed.
So Jeff Knapp is with me in case there's any other questions. This is a relatively small project. It's below the level at which case we're required to bring it to the board, but it's a fairly large percentage increase. And so as we mentioned in the in-camera portion, as part of our policy, because of the percentage increase, we need to bring it to the board. Our Middle Musquodoboit wastewater treatment plant, we originally had two separate projects, one to upgrade the process equipment, some of which has partially failed and has some direction from Nova Scotia Environment to repair. And the other is to modernize and upgrade the electrical system. So we started out at two projects, I believe one at 450,000, one at 400,000. We've, for simplicity and savings and things like contractor overhead and mobilization, we've combined them into two projects. We're at a point now where we have purchased the process equipment. We have tendered the project and will award it subject to funding approvals. And based on that, the total project cost is 1.38 million. So that's what we're seeking approval of.
Okay, let's put the motion on the floor.
So I can do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovelace.
I move that the Halifax Water Board approve funding of $1,380,000 for the Middle Musquodoboit Wastewater Treatment Facility Rotating Biological Contractor Upgrade Project.
Second.
Commissioner
Thank
Diego-Gamma
you.
with the second.
Just have a couple of comments on this. So, I realize that this is kind of this is a facility that is not, overly connected to all of the other systems that we have, right? It is in a very rural area. I'm trying to get an understanding of the end of life overall, where we are with the maintenance schedule for this facility. And, perhaps I'm jumping the gun a little bit. I realize that, cost of maintenance is, for service obviously is important, but I think at the other end of the spectrum, we need to consider, the overall life of this facility. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to that, Reed, if that's possible.
Yeah, I'm going to invite Jeff Knapp's with me. This comes out of his group. Jeff may have some words
Jeff.
to say. And from an overall maintenance perspective, Sushil's with us, I believe. He might want to jump on as well, but I'll turn it over to Jeff, Madam Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Commissioner. This facility was built in 1989. It's 32 years old. It probably had the equipment anyway in the facility probably had a useful life originally of around 25 years, and has been maintained, well since it was started in 1989. The rotating biological contactor that's there, the materials that are used in it are mostly plastic, and they're starting to deteriorate and fall apart. And you can actually see in figure 2 of the report where a section of the media is actually fallen off and broken away, and it's causing regulatory compliance issues with the plant. Yes, I think the civil structure and civil works are probably, they probably have a useful life of anywhere from 40 to 50 years, but the mechanical components, the electrical components probably have a useful life of anywhere from 15 to 25 years. So I think we have gotten good service at the facility, but it's now reaching the end of its life from a mechanical and electrical perspective and needs to be upgraded.
So in light of that, if we have another 20-ish years with it, obviously we're going to have to do a capital replacement at some point, or some kind of rebuild of this facility. Obviously, technology has changed since this was first built. The thing that I'm concerned about most, though, is that it took an environmental directive for Halifax Water to get to the point where we're upgrading this facility. So I'm wondering, clearly this would have been conversations with the Department of Environment, knowing that this was failing. So I'm just concerned. If we continue to put this off and it continues to deteriorate, certainly in the end it's going to cost us more. But just wondering, what is the plan for overhaul or replacement of this facility?
Well, a couple of points on that. We had planned to upgrade this facility prior to that order being issued. The order was issued based on a specific equipment failure, and that was the RBC failure that occurred. We knew we had to replace this equipment before that, and we did have it in our capital budget, and actually had started that process. But in between, this failure occurred and resulted in that order. That's what happened in that case. The longevity after this upgrade, there's no reason why the civil works and the rest of the facility can't operate for another 30 or more years once we've completed this upgrade. This upgrade will see almost all of the mechanical and electrical equipment replaced in that facility. And when we are doing the replacement, we'll be inspecting all of the civil works and repairing anything that needs to be done during that upgrade as well. So it should be good to go for another 30 years or more.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zaharov?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Jeff, I noticed that the equipment you're planning to source from is from the same supplier that the equipment is currently installed. Is there any major concerns with this equipment? Are you happy with it, that you're moving forward with the same supplier? And if any supportability concerns, such as a minimum number of years for spares available, anything like that, was addressed in the RFQ process?
Yeah, so we are using the same supplier as the original equipment, but our procurement process did go to public tender, and we did have I believe, one or two other respondents to that. But this ended up being the most cost-effective solution for us. And the company that we've chosen has been in business for a long time, and we feel that they are able to support us long term. In fact, they have supported us all along the way. But in this case, this RBC system, there are new ones available, newer technology available in RBC systems, and that's what we're purchasing. This old type of system is no longer supported by the company because it's 30 plus years old. And the newer systems that they have now perform better and will be equally supported over the life of the equipment, we think.
Okay, thank you. Another question, please. So you mentioned that almost all the electrical parts of the building will be upgraded. So I suspect this addresses some of the potential safety hazards that were flagged on the report, including the lighting and stuff. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the electrical systems all inside of the RBC building itself will all be classified to a hazardous location. As well, for instance, all of the conduit, the electrical conduit, which are currently not sealed and allow gases and moisture to get back up into the electrical cabinetry, those will all be installed as per classification requirements. They'll all be sealed, and we'll have a small dedicated electrical building there that will separate everything completely based on our current design standards for facilities like this. So everything will be brought up to current day codes and will be much safer and meet all of our safety requirements.
Understood. Thanks. Last one for me, please, Jeff. The project cost estimate table I think it's page 173 in the package here. I think it's just to confirm the assumed exchange rate CAD to USD is 1, but I think all the prices were taken in the Canadian, so this exchange rate probably irrelevant. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, all of the
Okay.
prices quoted were in Canadian dollars.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm done.
Commissioner Deagle-Gammon?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. When you're looking at the funding, the additional 1.3 million, I see that, you know, 2 parcels of that come from existing capital projects envelopes. The additional funding of the 530,000 coming from surpluses in projects that were either deferred or canceled. Is there any risk to any project that was deferred or canceled, or
Yeah,
is there any impact on that on other projects? I'm just curious. I know it's not in the scheme of the numbers we've been using today, it doesn't look like a lot, but curious.
yeah, and so, Madam Commissioner, I think to answer that, you'll recall in item 5.1, Louis had talked about we had accumulated unspent capital of about 300 million, and we've spent 96 this year, so that comes out to about 200 million. So that is the funding source. And this is a question that we do get from time to time from the URB. And it's to a certain degree, it is sometimes we budget a project and we defer it a couple of years and we rebudget it, but that money has appeared in a previous capital budget. So sometimes that's the source. A lot of times, maybe we defer a project that's been budgeted because we've got a commitment, let's say, to accommodate growth, and the development did not come, or we're coordinating with HRM. A lot of times we delay projects for perfectly good reasons. Sort of, we just talked about the Fairview Cove one. So for the most part, those projects do have a logical reason why they're deferred and or canceled, and we're managing them. And I was also going to say, sometimes we put a project into a capital budget and we do an investigation and we decide, you know what, we don't need a capital project, we're going to do something else. So that would create some of that money as well. But you know, as we've told you before, we're trying to get our capital budget or our capital delivery capacity up. We're adding more staff and we're renewing our processes. So in a general sense, there are projects, you know, such as bread and butter water main renewals, sewer renewals, that we're not doing as much as we would like. And so implicitly there is some risk in that, but I do believe that we select the ones that are of highest priority to bring forward in any given year.
Thank you.
Just one question for me. Jeff, on page 4 of the report, it's page 180 of the board package. It's from CBCL last November. It indicated that the assumption is that there's not expecting a population or industrial commercial growth as the assumption. And, you know, I can see by the trends that the peak flows you picked make sense, but any comment on that assumption?
I do believe the assumption was based on our data from our IMP, which is now 4 years old, but I think in that area, you know, they're not expecting any significant population growth, which would impact the wastewater treatment facility for the foreseeable future. But certainly we would, you know, watch that and every time we go through an IMP process to make sure that we're still going to be able to meet capacity there.
Yeah.
But right now there's capacity in that facility.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, I can say, you know, there's a small water system and wastewater system in Middle Musquodoboit, and both of those were built in the 80s by Halifax County to address community needs at the time. And, you know, it's a large rural area with the village of Middle Musquodoboit in the middle of it. So the defined water wastewater service area for those facilities is very much shrink wrapped around the existing village of Middle Musquodoboit, and I've been involved in them since 2001, and you know the service population has been pretty stable. If through HRM planning there was a desire to promote it as a growth node or increase density or whatever in that village, then we would be part of those discussions about plant capacity.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll vote on the motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Cecile, Jeff, and Reed for all those capital approvals.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Moving on, other business, item 6, wet weather management program presentation.
So we have Heather Miller, operations engineer on the wastewater and stormwater side of the business with us today. And this presentation was made to the last, actually second last, Environment, Health and Safety Committee meeting. And the Environment, Health and Safety Committee asked that it be brought forward to the Halifax Water Board because they thought it would be such relevant and useful information. So welcome to Heather, and take it away.
Morning, Heather.
Good morning, everyone. Just a brief agenda of what we're going to run through for the wet weather management program. We'll give you a little overview of what our program is and what it is that we're doing. What we have done in the past, so the fiscal year 2021-22, what it looks like right now for this year of the 2022-23 year, some program development opportunities that we're working on and a few other initiatives, and we should have some fair bit of time for question and answers at the end. So our team is fairly small. We operate out of the wastewater operations department. It's myself, Heather Kroll and Angie Rain are 2 engineering technologists and a data analyst that works with us. And we also each year will have an 8-month summer student from Dalhousie working with us. So this year it's Madison Robinson who's been with us for the last 7 or 8 months. So a little bit of background on the program. Back in 2012, when we completed the first IRP, there was a recommendation that said we needed to form a program that would help us efficiently manage our volume of wet weather generated flows that we're getting into our wastewater system. So the Wet Weather Management Program, WWMP, you'll see that abbreviation was created coming out of the IRP in 2012. It has grown significantly over the last 10 years, so hopefully I'll be able to highlight some of the growth that we've had within that program for you. So originally we were addressing operational concerns. So anything that our operations staff saw out in the field, whether that would be at a pump station or flows coming into a treatment facility, we were focused on those areas, and also anything that was coming up as a compliance issue. When we did the infrastructure master plan in 2018-ish, we also started addressing capacity issues to allow for growth. So that was that we've kind of changed our direction a little bit and are now following outcomes from the infrastructure master plan and the IRP in 2019. You can go ahead, change. I don't know who has control of the slides, but
Lost Jake.
there you go. So we are looking at rainflow derived inflow and infiltration. So that's RDII. So it's extraneous stormwater and groundwater that enters the wastewater collection system. This can cause overflows with our systems, flooding, and backups. So you can see the graphic down on the bottom on the left-hand side just gives an indication of the different sources of flow that can get into our system. Over time, our infrastructure is in great condition. As it ages, we could see cracks within our own infrastructure, but also on the private side within a lateral. So that is a source of flow into our system. We could also end up with a direct connection if that was something that was missed during construction or an after fact that somebody just connected by mistake into the wrong system. We also have flows that come from the private side, so homeowners could have a sump pump to prevent flooding in their basement. Their downspouts from their house or their foundation drains could be directly connected. So these are all sources that we're looking and exploring all of these potential sources for inflow and infiltration when we're reviewing certain areas. The graph that we have on the screen, you can see the red line at the bottom. This represents a storm that we had, and this was Halloween of 2021. I don't know if anybody was out trick-or-treating during that year, like over a year ago, but it was very wet that Halloween. So what we typically see in our system is the red line. So we're probably like less than a liter per second of flow in this particular sewer shed. But when we had all of that rain, we saw a peak of almost 15 liters per second. So that is a significant increase. And this happens in a number of our areas. So we would look at these storms and trying to investigate and find the source of flow coming into there and propose rehabilitation methods that would address the issues here. You can go to the next slide. So our program has formalized quite a bit over the last 10 years. Recently, before I joined this particular group and in this position, we worked with the UARB to create a decision matrix, and that helps us systematically evaluate the areas, make sure that we're working in the right areas, that they meet a defined criteria. So we would work through this decision matrix that's up on the screen. It just says, it ranks all of our areas from high, medium, and low. It tells us what different types of activities we should be doing. That's anywhere from flow monitoring, smoke testing, CCTV, private home inspections, if we needed to do some dye testing, investigation into the private side and public side infrastructure. So over the last number of years, we've also added a formal report that mirrors this decision matrix. So that really helps us summarize all the information that we have gathered in those particular areas so we can present it to the URB if we have particular capital projects or pass it on to even just our capital group if they are doing work within a certain area and they have background information on the investigations that we have completed. So the majority of the area, we're trying to reduce the peak RDII by a certain percentage. Depending on the direction that we receive from the master plan, we could be attempting to reduce the peak by 50% or like as low as 30 in certain areas. Okay, next slide. So you can see the map of our service boundary. You can see different east, central, and west regions. The areas that are red are areas that have been flagged through our decision matrix process that have high criteria for flow that suggests we should be doing more investigation and looking into that area. Over the time, like since 2015 to 2021, we have really expanded the number of areas that we have been monitoring. So in 2021, we had 50 flow monitors installed within the system. Right now, we are probably sitting at about 60. So our staff are monitoring those areas and reviewing the data that we get to see where we should be focusing our efforts on and what the data is telling us. We use the data to do pre-analysis and also post-analysis of our rehabilitation projects. Okay, next slide. So we've also been able to leverage a lot of useful tools that we have within Halifax Water to help share our information. Some of this also will highlight like how much work we have been doing. So last year we completed almost 23 kilometers of CCTV work, and that's across like through Fish Hatchery, which it would be like the lower Sackville or middle Sackville area. We've been out in Eastern Passage and then also Ellenvale and Dartmouth. So we spread the work around quite a bit depending on where our priority areas are. And we're able to visualize and see this information. Our asset management group creates a CCTV televised main dashboard. So this just gives us a quick look at the condition, the overall structural condition of our pipes within a particular sewer shed. So that's where you see the green, yellow, and red, orange pipes. That's red is bad, green is good. We've also been able to complete 14 kilometers of smoke testing, and that's done internally at Halifax Water through our regulatory services department. They complete all of that work for us at the moment. They create also a dashboard where we are easily able to see the results that come out if there's any deficiencies within the system on the public or private side. The little graphic on the right shows that a smoke testing result where it was identified as a private service lateral has the potential for multiple leaks because when they did the smoke testing, they saw smoke coming out of the grass that would have been in line with where the lateral should have been. So this is very handy. Typically there are pictures attached to this and that's how we share information back and forth. Okay, next slide. So in 2021-22, we did a number of different projects. We picked a few that we thought would be good to highlight here, and it shows a variety of the different rehabilitation methods that we have used in the past and will be using in the future. So Crescent Avenue, we completed the mainline lining. We did this on the east side. We had previously done on the west side, the area that's in like a pinkish reddish area. We completed that a number of years ago and saw great success. So when we moved on to the bluish greenish area, this time last year, we were doing the lining work there. So we will be reporting our results in the 2022 annual report. Our initial results are fairly good, just anecdotally. In 2021, we did not have any SSOs from the Crescent Avenue pump station, so that is significantly better. And we saw overall improved performance of the pump station. So that is very good news. So we will have data to report probably like in the March, or at the end of March, we will receive data for that particular project. Next slide. So this is a new project. We called it a pilot project in the Clayton Park area. We did lateral connection grouting. This was a very cost-effective option to address defects where at the lateral main connection. So it was a grout injection that would seal that connection point around the laterals to the main. So within this sewer shed, we were able to complete 48% of the laterals were grouted. So again, those results will come in and we will be reporting them, the final results next year. You could flip down the slide. Here just shows like how we look at our reductions. So the blue line that has the 2017, this is when we did the analysis on like pre-rehab, we were up here, and what we want to see is the line move down. So right now we are sitting at the orange line for the total rehabilitation that we've done in the sewer shed. So we have lined the main line and we also have done the lateral rehabilitation. We have seen a significant reduction in the RDII within that sewer shed. Last year was a little bit challenging. We had a very unique rainfall. I think it started raining on November, or rainfall season, I guess, started raining on like mid-November and didn't seem to stop until February. So we had a very saturated, like high groundwater level, and our system really didn't have a lot of time to recover with the number of rain events that we had last year. So we did see a little bit of an increase if you just look at the storms from 2021. However, we are still quite a bit lower than we started off initially. Next slide. So we've also looked at issues within the private side system. So we had selected back in 2019 a particular area that we thought would be good to address the private side. So these are issues on particular within somebody's home or on their property, where it could be their downspouts are connected into the system, they have a sump pump, those types of issues. So we started in 2019. This is all done internal at Halifax Water through our regulatory service department. We were able to visit almost 80% of the properties to complete an inspection. And when I think of those 80%, we had almost 20% that came up with violations. So, and then those violations could vary down between a number of different issues. So they were all identified and the homeowners were given notice of what their violations were and a timeline to fix them. As of March 2022, 50% of the identified violations were corrected. So we will be reporting the final results of that private side pilot within our 2022 annual report. Okay, next slide there. Some of you may be very familiar with the Springfield Lake sewer shed. It is a small area, used to be kind of maybe cottage country, but has been developed into a larger development with its own wastewater treatment facility. So we have had historically a number of wet weather issues within this area. Our internal staff completed 15 manhole repairs. So they would have gone out and done manhole inspections and noticed that there were issues within a number of manholes with our infrastructure. So that could be anything from like just a small leak around the base or the joints, or something around the cover, or if there was a hole in the side of the manhole. So they went out and completed a grout injection project out there, and they repaired 15 manholes. And we saw significant improvement within this sewer shed. We were responding to this area due to like issues at the pump stations when there was only 20 millimeters of rain, and operations has been reporting that we can now hold our own out in Springfield up until like 50 millimeters of rain. So that is good news that there's less intervention required during rain events. So this was a very successful project, and it's something that we will continue to monitor over time. Like, how well did those grout injections work? Has water moved and found a new way to get into the system? So we will keep an eye on that over time. Okay, next slide, please. So this is really just to highlight the number of different projects that we have on the go. And the way the wet weather management program works is we start in a pre-monitoring phase where we're doing flow monitoring, collecting all the data. Then we go into a rehabilitation stage that could be something fairly quickly and is done within one season, or maybe it takes like a year or two to complete. And then we do post-monitoring. So we have a number of different projects in various phases, and we usually monitor 2 years after we complete a project to make sure that the results are staying where we thought they were. So this is an idea. The orange represents pilot projects. So that's a Clayton Park lateral grouting, and then the private side pilot. All of the other ones, the blue projects, are related to the infrastructure master plan and working within priority areas that have come out of that plan. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what have we been doing for the last 6 months and kind of where we're going until the end of 2023? We're continuing with all of our routine activities, flow monitoring, CCTV inspections, smoke testing, reviewing all of our data, formalizing up the decision matrix reports for a lot of our areas. So we are really in the gathering all of our data, creating the reports, and recommending rehabilitation options for a number of our different areas. So it takes a while to collect all the data, and we've done that for the last number of years, and now we're ready to make decisions and start implementing more projects than we have been in the past. So we are doing some work within the fish hatchery sewer shed right now, and then we will be proposing this year a large amount of lining work within fish hatchery and also the Loon Lake sewer shed in Dartmouth. Okay, next slide. So some of our like overall program development options. So this is outside of like looking at those priority areas. How do we continue to advance the program and make sure that we are following up with the standard and what anything new that's kind of out in the industry? How do we make sure that our program is staying aligned with that? So right now we're looking at improving our private side program and our the integration with our overall wet weather management program. So we did just complete a few workshops where we engaged a consultant to help us review our programs to see what we are doing, what are we doing well, are there areas for improvement, is there stuff that we're missing? So we just wrapped up a few of those workshops at the end of October, and we will review kind of the information that came out of there and have a few more workshops again in January to wrap up that type of project. We are also looking at how can we use our flow monitoring data? How can we enhance the use of that? What other areas can we look at that we're not currently doing? Can we do some more trend analysis to see what's going on in particular sewer sheds? Can we better define the type of flow that we are seeing coming into our system? Is it a fast response, slow response? And that can help us indicate and prioritize what type of activities like CCTV and smoke testing we should be doing within particular areas. So that's a few things we're working on there. We're also looking at how we can enhance the use of CityWorks. So Halifax Water has been using CityWorks for a number of years now, and there's a lot of data that we can use. So when our operations staff respond to a wet weather event, how do we learn from that? And how do we kind of say, okay, we're going to the same area all the time. We should really be highlighting that and bringing it forward. It may not be part of the infrastructure master plan, but it's an operational issue that we should be looking at. And we're also trying to track defect repair work orders for improved reporting within our annual report. Okay, next slide. So a few other initiatives that we're also looking at is a lateral replacement program. So we have started doing lateral inspections within the wet weather management program on a higher frequency this year. And generally we're seeing that in the areas that are problematic, the laterals are also in poor condition on both the public and private side. So we have to look a little bit more on what we're going to do and how can we replace the laterals with all the other rehabilitation activities that we have going on. We also are noting from our CCTV program that is run out of asset management, when they're gathering condition information everywhere, we are finding defects that would have an impact on I&I and the amount of wet weather that get into the system. They may not be an area where we would want to line the entire thing, but how do we address some of those more major defects if we have like a infiltration gusher into a system? Like, how do we make sure that we are kind of addressing those where they need to be addressed? Okay, I think next one might be it. Yeah, so that's just kind of an overview of our program, where we're at now, and kind of where an outlook of where we hope to be or move over the next year.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you to the Environmental Health and Safety Subcommittee for recommending that presentation. It was very helpful. Any questions for Heather? Oh, Commissioner Zaharov.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Not really a question, rather we just wanted to say thanks to Heather and the team. It's not an easy job and probably tedious, and you don't see the results overnight. You see the results probably of the following year, if not in 2 years. So thanks so much. Really good job.
Thank you. Sometimes there is a lot of waiting for that next quarter of flow monitoring data to see if you've been successful. So far, we've been pretty good.
Well, we will be on the edge of our seat waiting for the annual report now, Heather. Thank you for that, Heather.
Thank you.
Okay, item 8 as shown on the agenda, risk reporting and approval of the changes to the corporate risk register.
And Jeff McCauley is going to speak to that, and hopefully you can all access the report within your board books. You should see a note in the chat from Heidi. We were concerned that there seemed to be an issue with the link in Diligent, but I think the report is working for most people now. Yeah. Over to you, Jeff McCauley.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is the second risk report on Tier 1 risks for this fiscal year. I believe we last reported to the board in June of this year, but since that time we had quite a few internal and external events that caused us to reevaluate the strategic risks that we're facing. So we had some of those are, we had 2 incidents at major pumping stations of the West region caused for different reasons. Rising fuel and chemical costs continue to be an issue, mainly due to external factors like supply chain inflation and geopolitical issues. We awarded the RFP for the Halifax Water Climate Action Plan to Sustainability Solution Group, and work on phase 1 is well underway. And employee attraction and retention has become an issue for certain roles within the organization. So the proposed changes in the corporate risk register, they include the addition of the risk of environmental discharges related to utility operations as a Tier 1 risk. And this is due to increased pressure from regulators in relations to CSOs and SSOs. And then changes to the status on risk direction and mitigation for a number of the Tier 1 risks due to the reasons outlined in the board report. And then also some updates to the risk response plans for each Tier 1 risk, which is shown as an attachment to the board report. But yeah, any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer. And I think we have most of the risk owners here on the meeting, so if I can't answer them, hopefully they can.
Hey, Jeff, let's put the motion on the floor.
I can do that.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kolomeitsev.
I'll move that the Halifax Water Board approve the corporate risk register for 2022-23 as attached to the report dated November 18th, 2022.
Second.
Commissioner Lovelace got her hand in there. Commissioner Lovelace for the second. Any questions for Jeff or a risk owner?
I do have a question.
Commissioner Lovelace?
I'm just trying to think how to word this appropriately so that it makes sense. So when we talk about cybersecurity, obviously there are significant amount of changes and variables within cybersecurity. I'm interested to know from a risk perspective, obviously there's, you know, how do I word this? There are significant variables that are outside of our control as far as having an impact to our risk mitigation or risk direction. So in other words, there's the port, there's the municipality, there's the airport, and so on and so forth. So within, you know, a geographically small area as well, sorry, and again, there's also the province. So within that geographic area, I'm trying to understand who are we working with to mitigate those cybersecurity risks.
I think Reed is best positioned to answer that question.
Thank you, Reed.
Yeah, there's a few things we're doing. I mean, one is we're working with HRM through the Municipal Auditor General. So we're right now just concluding a Municipal Auditor General report on cybersecurity for our operational technology or SCADA systems. So I believe that report will alert us to any vulnerabilities that we might not be aware of. And of course, they'll require us to have an action plan to do that. There are a variety of things that we do to work on cybersecurity. One is the American Waterworks Association is very active in cybersecurity, puts out a lot of governance documents. There's a set of standards. They come out of the US, but they're applicable to us, called NIST standards. We follow those as our standard. I think most importantly, we've done it's going on about 3 to 5 years now. E&Y did a cybersecurity assessment for us. That forms the basis of the cybersecurity program that's in our IT roadmap, and we report on that regularly to our board ERM Committee on Cybersecurity. That's a program that's going to take 2 or 3 years. And we've also taken an approach where we, you know, in cybersecurity, typically some of the best benefit comes from some of the least cost or easiest things to do, if you will. So educating employees about not sharing their passwords and that type of thing. Multi-factor authentication, which is similar to your bank account. You don't just have to log in, but then they send you a text message. So now not all our devices, but about 3/4 of our devices now have multi-factor authentication. So I'm not sure I've addressed the core of your answer, Commissioner, but there's a variety of things we're working on along a number of fronts.
That, I think, does address my question. Obviously, it's fresh in everyone's mind what has happened to Sobeys in particular recently, and how easy it was in that sense to halt business. Obviously, we're in the business of public safety, so it's important for commissioners in particular to understand the breadth and the scope of cybersecurity that's taking place, and working closely with partners. So thank you, Reed, for that. And, you know, I realize it's a moving target, so appreciate the work from staff.
Any other questions from the board members? Okay, we'll take a vote on the motion on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next item, item 9, Bedford West areas 10 and 11, capital cost contribution charges.
So I can put the motion on the floor, Madam Chair, if you wish, or we'll wait until the presentation.
We will call upon you after the presentation. Are you up, Kenda?
I believe so. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we wanted to give the board a bit of an overview of CCCs. You may recall seeing an annual summary in the report in June, but it dawned on us that some of you may not have been involved in any CCCs that were created kind of from their infancy. So we wanted to provide just an overview of what is involved in a CCC and its purpose, capital cost contribution. And also this one has a bit of a slight or different origin to it for those that have seen a capital cost contribution be established in the past. So we wanted just to touch on some of those aspects so that you understand the motion in front of you. And so basically our rules and regulations allow for a CCC to be established. And the purpose of a capital cost contribution is to develop an equitable cost sharing arrangement between multiple landowners in a master plan area that is going to have a lot of infrastructure installed and development happening within it. And so basically this is purely the definition from our regulations. It's for the oversized water, wastewater and stormwater infrastructure within a defined charge area, and the cost of providing the infrastructure shared amongst the developers, and in some cases by the commission if there's a benefit to our existing rate base. And basically after the completion of a master plan study, a charge area could be established and will be the basis of the water, wastewater, and stormwater capital cost contribution charge that is applied to those lands. And so when one is being established, of course, there's considerations to all aspects of the infrastructure, financial risk to the commission, the timing of the development, and any other considerations that could have a financial impact on the commission itself. Next slide, please, Jake. So there's some context around what goes into establishing infrastructure charges. We've basically identified 3 types of infrastructure that we have within our system. And the first one being local infrastructure. And basically that is any water, wastewater, stormwater pipes that are installed in a street that are for the sole purpose of providing service to the development and the buildings along that street. And those costs are borne fully by the developer themselves. When we talk area master, which is basically for a CCC area, we're looking at larger infrastructure that's required to provide service to multiple landowners. So for example, a water transmission main might provide service to 3 landowners, and it may need to be, if any one landowner was going to develop on their own, the pipe may only need to be 300 millimeters diameter. But where they're developing and drawing water from that main that might go through the development, it may need to be 400 millimeters in diameter. And so the oversizing and establishing the CCC is trying to come up with an equitable way to cost share in the differential between a 300 to a 400 water main amongst all of the.
Oh, we just lost your audio.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's better.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened. So basically, area master is for oversized infrastructure that benefits a defined area of multiple landowners. Regional infrastructure you may be more familiar with because of our regional development charges, the RDCs. Those are collected at the building permit stage and essentially are paying to fund larger infrastructure such as water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, and major trunk sewers like you heard earlier with the Fairview Cove. Something that's going to provide benefit to multiple plan areas and communities, not just one particular community. Next slide, please. And so there's a lot of pieces here, but when we're establishing the charge for a CCC for a collection area, we work with HRM. We understand what the growth area that they're looking at, and some examples you may be familiar with would be Bedford West, Bedford South, the future Port Wallace. And we look at what infrastructure is going to be needed to provide service to that community that would benefit all of the landowners that are participating in the development of that community. And basically, we work with the stakeholders and develop an infrastructure list, and also develop an agreed upon rate structure. So if the differential from going from a 300 millimeter water main to a 400 is $275 a meter, that is the established rate that gets put into the financial model for the CCC creation. In addition, we have to consider engineering costs, contingencies, HST. And when we look at developing the financial model, there is an apportionment of fire protection that is for the benefit of HRM Fire Services, and that's removed from the costs for the water system and paid for by HRM. We also remove any benefit to existing customers from the financial model, and that is paid for from our capital budget. So if, for example, we remove a pump station that is existing because this new infrastructure goes in, we see that as a benefit to Halifax Water, and we'll pay for that cost through our capital programming. There's also a number of financial factors that go in to make sure that we achieve cost neutrality at the end of the lifespan of the development area. So there's inflation factors, interest, financing factors, and we escalate the charge by CPI annually to make sure that we're keeping up with the costs. And as I said, at the end of the lifespan of the development, the CCC should be achieving cost neutrality or net zero. In order for us to apply these charges to the lands, we do have to get permission from the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. And so pending the outcome of this, if it is approved, we'll be then taking a package to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board to set this up. Next slide, please, Jake. Some of the mechanics that go into these developments and management of the CCCs, there's a reimbursement aspect. And so if you recall, I mentioned that the stakeholders will agree on a rate for that oversized component. And as a developer constructs a phase of their development, and if that portion of that development required oversized water main to go in it, when the infrastructure is completed, the developer will be reimbursed the amount that was agreed upon at the start of the CCC. And so they're assuming the risk that if it was agreed that it was going to be $275 for the differential, and over time it becomes $300, that's their risk with how these are set up. Next slide, please. With the collections, at the same time that we're accepting the infrastructure, we're also getting a subdivision plan that identifies the total area that was developed with that phase. And we take that area, apply the charge rate that was agreed upon, and the developer will pay their share at that time to Halifax Water and for their overall contribution in the master plan community. And typically we see these CCC areas, master plan areas, usually take 20 to 30 years to fully develop and grow. And so that has to be factored in as we do our financial predictions. Next slide, please. So the one before you today, sub-areas 10 and 11, are part of the larger Bedford West master plan community. And so the area that's in the dashed lines, attachment A of your package, that has an established CCC on all of the lands for any of the oversized water and wastewater infrastructure that has been installed and will be installed, and it benefits. The analysis was done back September in 2012 for how much money everybody has to pay for the development of all of this land. I'm going to ask Jake to go to the next slide because sub-areas 10 and 11 are a little bit different. Because some of the infrastructure that was needed to start the development was going to be installed in an existing street, Kearney Lake Road, we had to, and it was going to be installed prior to all the planning being completed for sub-area 10. It was determined that it was more efficient and less disruptive to the traveling public to install the oversized infrastructure at the time, and then recover the local component of the infrastructure from those landowners that would benefit in sub-area 10 and 11. If this was to happen under normal development practices, the owners of 10 and 11 would have to have installed that infrastructure on their own, but we facilitated that in 2018. So the charge before you today is for Halifax Water to recover basically what we upfronted to those landowners in 2018 when we installed the oversized full infrastructure. So they're going to pay their base infrastructure, for example. So in the water main example, in 2018, we installed a 400 diameter water main. And the 300 diameter water main that is essentially part of that 400 diameter water main, that portion is for the benefit of sub-area 10 and 11. And so they're going to pay that. We've worked with HRM planning. They're at a point now where they know what development is going to probably occur in these areas, as well as the stakeholders and landowners of that portion of Bedford West. So they're basically in agreement that they would pay this charge as what would be essentially their local infrastructure costs had it happened under normal practices. And the next slide just shows sub-area 11, which also has some benefit from existing infrastructure that was installed in 2018. So I will take any questions.
We'll have Commissioner Lovelace put the motion on the floor first.
Certainly, Madam Chair. I move that the Halifax Water Board approve the development and submission of an application to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board to establish capital contribution charges within the Bedford West Master Plan area specific to the sub-areas 10 and 11 for recovery of Halifax Water capital funds spent in 2018 for the installation of local water and wastewater mains. Is there a seconder?
Oh, Commissioner Zaharov can second that. It's the competition today.
Fantastic. So we do have sorry, Madam Chair, I do have a couple of questions here. So, wow, thank you, Kenda. You know, this is a lot of work to get us to this point. Obviously, there's a significant amount of development activity that's happening in the West Bedford area. So being able to catch up, so to say, and get some of this stuff approved is important so we can go about doing our business as Halifax Water. At the same time, I am a little concerned in that we're moving forward on a specific areas 10 and 11, when there are other areas within Bedford West. So I'm just wondering why we're not creating a larger package. You know, is this going to set a precedent for the next phase for Sandy Lake, for example? Or, you know, are we going to be able to amend this process with the UARB when we go forward for Sandy Lake? I'm just wondering if this one-off approach is beneficial.
So thank you. It's a good question. And this one-off approach, it's not really precedent setting because it's just a nuance of development happening off an existing street and the nature of the infrastructure that was needed for the entire area. So sub-area 10 and 11 are already subject to a CCC for the larger infrastructure that was put in already and will be put in. This is very specific. I think it's most similar to HRM's local improvement charge, where there's the base infrastructure that is borne by the benefiting landowners. And so basically, if you envision Area 10, for example, only needed a 300 diameter water main to be developed, for them to develop. Because we had to put in infrastructure for wastewater in the same road corridor, we decided we would put the water main in that was needed for the entire area, which happened to be a 400. So we needed a way to go back and make sure that the people in area 10 are paying for that 300 component, even though the pipe is already there. And so they're going to have to pay the differential for their share of the 300 to 400, which is already established over the entire area. Plus now we're asking them to pay for their portion of the 300.
So this is definitely going to be a totally different conversation than when we get to the Hamptons Plains Road.
Yes, and so
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, and
Okay.
so you're aware as well, just as part of the history, there was infrastructure installed in Bedford West to ultimately the benefit of Sandy Lake, and HRM Council agreed to pay some of the oversizing for that for the future use. Again, so that we're not ripping up streets and putting in infrastructure later. It was all done comprehensively based on information we had at the time. So that was all part of the 2012 application that went to the Nova Scotia Utility Review.
Okay, thank you so much, Kenda.
No worries, thank you.
Any other questions from the floor? Okay, we'll vote on the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. And I see there's a few commissioners that have to leave right on 12, but I think we're on track with the agenda to be done on time. I did add item 10 to the agenda, and just prior to that, just two comments from the chair. First of all, congratulations to Halifax Water and the team that represented us as the host city for the National Waste and Wastewater Conference that was recently held. I was able to attend on behalf of the board. It was a fantastic conference and always lovely to see our world-class utility on the national stage. And Mayor Savage was able to provide opening remarks. So that was fantastic. And second of all, I believe Commissioner Anguish is on the call on behalf of the board. If you could pass our best wishes on to Jacques Dubé on his retirement. I believe you represent him on the board, so the board would like to send our best wishes to Jacques. So last item, I just asked for the operational performance information report to brought forward. I think it's a Kenda question. Hopefully she's still on. I have to find my question. It is page, whatever, 266 of the board package, or page 5, yep. Can you just comment on the first item there for the Halifax wastewater treatment, the high E. coli count?
And I may defer to Shashil if there's,
sorry.
no, just with
Cool.
the operational nuances.
That would be great. Thank you.
So the we do get occasionally those high E. coli count, typically either on when we have wet weather, where we get lots of solids carry over because this Halifax is a combined system. And secondly, we get them when we get very, very low flows and the UV lamp's transmissivity is impacted. So not unusual for those occasional blips to happen. And what happens is that when you get those counts, they are very high. And then the average comes down to, just because there are 4 or 5 samples taken, and that's why the average is 14,000 in this case, which is not an alarming from our perspective. However, having said that, we do have plans to we are looking at these UV systems and adding more modules and whatnot. Those are in our capital budgets and in the further planning studies that are underway.
Thank you, Sushil. Any questions from anyone else on this operations report? Okay, I need a motion to adjourn.
If you don't mind, I'd like to mention two
sorry.
things before we wrap up.
Sorry,
First,
go ahead.
I want to thank Kenda McKenzie because she was not scheduled to do the presentation on item 9. Another staff person was, and Kenda jumped in at the last minute. Anybody watching that presentation would never know that she had not prepared it and was not intended to do it. So well done, Kenda. The second thing I want to note that this is our final board meeting of 2022. And we did have 2 board members who were going through the term renewal process with the municipality. We're hoping you're all back with us in 2023. And just a reminder, we have a board workshop on December 16th, as well as the Halifax Water Annual Awards Banquet. We hope all of the board will attend, and we really sincerely thank you for all of the work you have done on behalf of Halifax Water ratepayers this year. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you, Kathy. I will just say that there's also a firefighters graduation on the 16th, so I'm going to be there, but I do have to step out to celebrate our new firefighters for HRM. But looking forward to that. It's been quite a year, and thanks. I just want to say thank you to all the staff who make these meetings enjoyable.
Yeah.
Awesome, good work.
Thank you.
And technical stuff easier to understand.
Okay, I still need a motion to adjourn.
So
moved.
moved.
There you go.
We'll give it to Commissioner Diggle-Gammon. Thank you, everyone.